The purpose of my talk is we're talking about the future today, right? And how we're going to get there. And it's actually a great segue from the last talk, which is us all taking a part in it. And the basis for this idea is that people often think that big ideas and the next major thing comes about by happenstance, that you're struck by lightning and you have that killer idea, right? And what I'm saying is you don't wait around for that big idea. If you wait for it to come to you, you can wait your whole life. It may happen once in your life, right, if it's just serendipity. But what I'm saying is you can actually force that big idea to come to you by following a process of idea generation and innovation, and by structuring that in a way to help you get the output of it to be innovative and things you can execute and things you can act on. So I'm talking today is about that process. So first of all, I want to give props where props are due. My teacher in this was a guy named Kevin O'Connor. He was the founder of DoubleClick, and they actually used a similar process to create what became DoubleClick, the first online advertising network and the biggest one. And so he was my teacher here. So let me get started. The basis of it all is the idea that necessity is the mother of invention. And if you accept that, if you accept that necessity is the mother of invention, I don't know what the necessity was here. It's probably why we don't use this today. Similarly here, if you accept that necessity is the mother of invention, the idea or the process of innovation is all around discovery of necessity. And so that's what this process is all about. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to find problems that have not yet been solved that we can solve, right? That's innovation. Well, luckily for us, we can scratch out the middle line here because problems that have been solved are no longer problems. So we're trying to find problems that we can solve, right? And this is the process that you can force. Sort of like the meat is not going to grind itself. I don't know why. This image just appeals to me as a way of describing forcing innovation. I can't exactly explain why. There's 3 steps here. The 3 steps to this are, we're moving. I feel like I'm shrinking or something. All right, well, it's like an animation, just, in the physical world. The 3 steps to this process are, first is a brainstorming process, so generating raw ideas. Then you have what I've sort of called, brought this term in as MapReduce, of taking all these ideas and a structured way of reducing them down to the core and the important and the meaningful ones. And then the matrix, which I will talk about later, but that's a way of actually generating your solutions. So first, let's talk about the brainstorm process. In the brainstorm, the idea is we're trying to come up with a few key pieces of information. So first, we're trying to look for constituencies, problems, and technologies. And why these 3 things? Well, our goal is to find people, and people who have problems, and people who have problems that we can solve. So that's why it's these 3 things that we're going to brainstorm, and in that order. So let's start off with these constituencies, the people. You might start out with a domain or a group of people that you know. It may be a group that you don't know as well. But the idea is we're brainstorming collections of human beings who may have problems that we can solve, right? And you may start off with an area that you know well, such as your industry or people like you. You may start off with an area that you just suspect that has a lot of problems that is interesting to you, right? So here's an example brainstorm where we looked at a lot of different types of, we started off with the realm of businesses. What sort of business problems can we solve? And actually we strayed a little bit. We had politics in there. We had people operating call centers. We had sales teams. We had virtual companies. We had business travelers. So you can see it's not all just about, say, strictly business, but you might actually cut across various types of people, right? Business travelers, that's a group. But you might also say, single mothers or, people who are at home, ill or something like that. You might have all different kinds of people, right? So now you've got this list, and we're going to engage in the MapReduce section. Well, we brainstormed, we came up with a lot of ideas, but now we got to get to the meaningful ones. So what you do is you start off, and everybody in the group, and typically you do this brainstorming with maybe 3 to 5 people, I found is a very useful number. And everybody who participated in the brainstorm gets N number of votes. And typically N is roughly the number of people who are there. So everybody gets, say, 5 votes, and you put a check next to the ones on this brainstorm, the 5 that you find are most interesting, right? And what you'll find is that once everybody puts their checks down, and you can have people write it down on paper first to keep them honest, but after they've put their checks up on the board, you'll see that the winners emerge. So there's groups that tend to be more interesting to the group as a whole. So you've applied the smarts of the group to narrowing down this list to the most interesting ones. So now you've got a few that are interesting here. And what you actually do next is you'll say, we actually want to repeat this process. We want to brainstorm and reduce again. And in particular, you may want to do this by drilling down on some of the things that you had previously identified as really interesting, right? So let's say that you start off with and you said, hey, I think small to medium-sized businesses are an interesting constituency. Well, that's still really broad. So now we're going to drill down, map, and reduce again, and we might come off with the fact that we think virtual companies, laundromats, and restaurants are the most interesting of those. And you might actually drill down more, right, until you get a list of things that are really interesting, right? So now you've got a list. After you've done this map reduce problem in the brainstorming, you've got a list of interesting people that you think, constituencies, groups of people that are interesting to you. So now the question is, what are their problems? So you do the same process again, right? You brainstorm problems, and you'll pick a group of people. So here we picked virtual companies. And we did some brainstorming around what are problems that virtual companies have. We came up with things like presence, who's online at a time, or sharing documents or revisions and things like that. These are all problems that a virtual company, companies that don't have an office and a lot of people are working remotely, they have. And again, you apply the map reduce, you drill down, and you get a list of interesting problems in an interesting group of people, an interesting constituency, right? So now you can see, wait, we found a problem set, and we've drilled down sufficiently so that we've defined them well, and you keep iterating on this. So now you've got a list of problems, right? The next brainstorming that you do, and you can do these in any order, really, this one you can do in any order, is we're going to brainstorm emerging technologies. Technologies that are near or at a point of inflection where they're becoming interesting, right? And so here's a brainstorm that we did, and we started off by thinking about technologies, and one of the ones that we came up with was voice over IP. This was a number of years ago. And then voice over IP, we drilled down more, and we said, well, what's interesting about voice over IP? What are the technological aspects of VoIP that are most interesting? And we came up with things how you can rapidly provision, how it's all software-based, et cetera. And again, we map reduced. We came up with our favorite aspects of VoIP. What are the most interesting things to us as a result? All right. So now, once you've done this process, we've got two things, and we've got a pretty valuable spot right now. We've got the most compelling problems for interesting groups of people, and we've got the most promising technologies that are on the horizon, right? And so now it's time for what we call the matrix, which is saying, how can we take these problems, when you put problems on one axis, how can we take these problems that are still out there, that have not yet been solved, and how can we take new and emerging technologies, things that are coming about that might allow us to actually solve these problems that haven't been solved in the past, right? And so you put up the technologies, and you put the problems, and each point now on this matrix, on this grid, is a potential solution to an existing problem using technologies, using something that's at a point of inflection, right? So you'd actually look at each potential grid here and say, does this new technology potentially solve this existing problem? And if it does, you might have something. You might have an innovative thing. You might be solving a problem that hasn't been solved yet, and the reason why you can solve it now is because a new technology has helped you to solve that problem with a new solution, right? And so each one of these squares you go through and you say, hey, I actually can't read it from here, but you say, hey, does this technology, cheap infrastructure, solve the problem of coordinating large groups of people? That's the upper left square there. And actually we ended up saying, no, I don't really see anything there. But then you moved on, and you might say the next one, which is integration with directories and coordinating large groups of people. Yeah, actually, that might be an interesting thing. Now that you've got directories like LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and you're trying to coordinate these people, the intersection of those two technologies might actually help us to solve that problem. And so we put a checkbox there, and sometimes you actually make a note of what the solution was, a quick jot down of what it is, right? And after you've done this, and you can do this multiple times, with multiple problem sets that you liked and multiple technology sets that you liked, you end up with this list of potential solutions that are innovative and are solving problems. And then you do the same thing again, right? You vote, and you reduce. So you take all the potential solutions, you may have 100 of them, and you vote and you say, hey, which ones of these solutions are the most interesting that the group likes? And now you've got an actionable set. So you may reduce this down to about 10 things, and now you'd start doing research into those areas. And say, hey, is this actually a problem? Is it true that no one is solving it? And does this technology actually provide a way of solving it? and now you can go. And I did this process, and we came up with about 1,000 ideas. About 100 of them were interesting. We wrote about 30 business plans and ended up executing on one of them. And so that's sort of the iterative process. And I'll give you another example here. So imagine doing this process in 1994. And what you come up with is a constituency that they came up with. And this is Kevin O'Connor. This was the process they went through, 1994. The constituency group they discovered was online publishers, this new internet thing. Who are the people who are going to be taking advantage of it? Well, publishers. What's their problem? Well, they're not going to know how to monetize all that publishing that they're doing. So what's the solution? An ad network, and you end up with DoubleClick. And that's actually the process of coming up with the DoubleClick advertising network. So let me finish here with a couple of disclaimers. So the first one is that ideas are cheap and execution is hard. So coming up with the ideas, hey, that's easy. That's basically free. You spend some time doing it. But it doesn't mean that anybody could have executed on DoubleClick. That's actually the hard part at that point. The second disclaimer I have is that I do not believe this process would have resulted in Twitter. So there's certain things that defy logic and defy exact needs and problems that you can identify with a group of people. Sometimes it is serendipity, and sometimes you just never know where that idea is going to come from. But given that, I'd say using this process, you can go out and you can force innovation. You can start grinding out ideas today instead of waiting for that big idea to come to you. That's it. Thank you very much.